Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this morning's episode of Trending. As always, it's brought to you in association with Iconic Coffee. Head over to shop.iconic.com and use the code TRENDING for 10% off. Richard Willett, how are you this morning on this fine Thursday?
I'm good, thank you. We've got up an hour early to get this in before the dot connector. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling all right, mate. I was out of my bed at 5 a.m, having been up about sort of 4:30, 4:45 anyway, with a vomiting daughter. So it's all good. It's parent life, mate. It's good times. Starting off today, this is an interesting one, Rich, right? So I don't know if you've heard this. There's a Netflix drama called Adolescence, which is getting all the headlines at the moment, which is quite extraordinary because it's a Netflix drama. Now, it's made by a guy called Stephen Graham, who's a very good actor. So it's disappointing for me in that sense, although he's already gone out there trying to get people to join the army for years as the voice of the army adverts. So, you know, he's already disappointed me. Now, the premise of Adolescence is basically you've got a young... sweet-looking white lad. He's got these eyes that make him look like a puppy dog, which is obviously completely intentional because it creates that emotive thing, who stabs a classmate to death. Now, the reason I say young white lad is because they've done that on purpose, right? Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to create something quite big out of this adolescence drama, which we'll come to what they're doing with that. And I don't think they feel like they could get that over the line. I think if he wasn't, because then you'd have obviously accusations, you know, potentially correctly, of racial profiling, of discrimination, of racism, of stirring up hatred against other ethnic groups and all this kind of stuff. So they're playing it safe in this sense. And I think that's intentional. So this boy basically... stabs a classmate. The reason for that is the premise of it in the drama is that it's online influencers. It's toxic masculinity, right? That's caused him to do it. He's a young, sweet kid, you know, perfect family unit, for want of a better term, if there is such a thing. But you get my point. He doesn't come from a broken home. He doesn't come from violent parents. It's not like he grew up in a drug den, basically. So they make it like it's this perfect, oh my God, if it can happen to him because of online influencers, it can happen to your kids. Little sweet Johnny and all that kind of stuff. Now, of course, shows like this are nothing new. You know, toxic masculinity and all that kind of stuff has been a bit of a buzz term, probably for at least a decade, isn't it, Rich? You know, you attack men, they attack manliness and testosterone and all that kind of stuff. It's negative. I mean, it's negative too. You need someone carrying out of a burning building, but okay, fine. But this is extraordinary, right? Because this is a political thing now. So I was driving home from work, and I listened to Talk Sport. So it's a talk radio show, but mainly about sport. But they have the odd headline every half an hour, every hour. This was the headline story, Rich. And I'm listening to it, I'm like, this is a Netflix drama. And it's top of the news. Talking about, you know, these online influencers and what they're doing and what they're causing and what needs to be done. And I'm thinking, you know, this kid ain't real. It gets better though. So this not only is taking up the news stories all over the news, by the way, it's not just TalkSport, it's now being talked about in Parliament. So it's being basically treated, from what I've seen, like a documentary. Like this is almost like a fly on the wall. This is what happened. This is why we need to change it, because this is what happened. And it's not, it's a drama. These are actors. It's a script that's written. Now, let me just show you this video. This is from Parliament yesterday. And the reason it's interesting is obviously there's a lady, I'm not sure of her name. I don't really keep up with politicians that much these days, Rich, because I can't stand any of them. But she basically comes up and she starts talking about this Netflix drama. Again, like I say, like it's real life. And then asks this question of the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. Now, he calls it a documentary. It's not, it's a drama. He calls it a documentary, then awkwardly, because he is quite a bumbling idiot, awkwardly sort of corrects himself. I found that quite significant. So here's the video, ladies and gentlemen.
Everyone is talking about Adolescence, the series by Knowsley's own Stephen Graham and Christine Tamarco. It highlights online male radicalisation and violence against girls. The creators of the show are calling for screenings in Parliament and schools to spark change. So will the Prime Minister back this campaign to counter toxic misogyny early and give young men the role models they deserve?
Prime Minister.
Yes, and at home we are watching Adolescence with our children. I've got a 16-year-old boy and a 14-year-old girl, and it's a very, very good documentary to watch, or drama. This violence carried out by young men, influenced by what they see online, is a real problem. It's abhorrent, and we have to tackle it. We are putting in specialist rape and sexual offences teams in every police force, doing work on the 999 calls. But this is also a matter of culture that I think it's important that across the whole House we tackle this emerging and growing problem.
Now, he is a bumbling fool, like I say, Rich, but they're treating it like a documentary, like it's reality. Yeah. And that's why we need to do something about it. So I thought that was interesting that he called it that before, like I say, correcting himself. They're talking about showing it in Parliament to all the MPs. They're talking about showing it now in every school across the United Kingdom. It's a drama. Now, for me, Rich, just quickly, I think it's all about the online harms bill. Put my tinfoil hat on. Labour have been pushing the online harms bill for a long time. There's cross-party support, of course, because, when the cult want to get something in, they need everyone on board. But Labour have particularly been the driving force behind it. Now, it hasn't had a hell of a lot of support, not really, because overwhelmingly in this country, we believe in freedom of speech. Most people do. And that includes the freedom to be offensive, because offence is taken, not given. Yep. So I think this is all part of it, because what they're doing is they're creating this emotive programming to garner support. Like I say, it's this perfect family scenario, 2.4 children. It's not a broken home. It's not a kid who grew up on the street. It's basically saying, you think your life is perfect and you've got it sorted and you're a good parent. Well, you're not, because this guy's got access to, Andrew Tate or whoever else that they're aiming it at. But of course, what the online harms bill is it's just an attack on free speech. Because define harm, Rich. It's disconcertingly vague, isn't it? So you go, okay, well, harmful content. Okay, well, so what's that? Hate speech. Okay, well, if I say that I don't believe women can have a penis, that's hate speech. That's offensive. That's bigoted. If I don't agree that with Israel committing genocide, well, that's anti-Semitic. Well, that's hate speech then. So that's harmful. That's online harms bill. Okay, well, I can't talk about that then. Okay, well, let's think about COVID. I mean, I called out the vax. I called out masks. I called out lockdowns. Yeah, but that brought people to harm, because the vaccine saves lives. Remember, it did before. Before everyone now admits that it didn't, and it killed people, a lot of people. But that would be deemed to be harmful, because you're spreading misinformation, which is stopping people getting the jab, and that's harmful. Okay, online harms bill, you're banned then. You're prosecuted then. That's my take on it, Rich. Call me a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, but I think that's what it's about. I think that's why they're pushing this adolescence drama as if it's real life, as if it's a documentary, as if it could happen to your kids if you don't support the online harms bill to get these toxic masculinity influencers taken off of line.
Well, absolutely. The fact that he called it a documentary wasn't by accident at all. Yes, he's gone back on it, but that's not an accident. That's clearly a key word there, and people take that into their subconscious, and that will be, this is even though on the surface you'll think that's nonsense, and clearly but yeah, it's based on real events. It's not based on real events or a real event. It's based on probable events, or possible events is probably the best way to put it. There's so many possible events out there because we live in a world of all possibility. So again, they're just playing into that. This is cybernetics. What they do is they plug something into the system. So cybernetics is the study of whole systems complete. So think of it as a circle. So what they do is they plug something into that circle to get a different outcome at the end. So they've just plugged this in to try and push the outcome, as you say, for the online harms bill, using a very real point, like the Andrew Tates of the world, who do push this toxic masculinity of that's a terrible term, but they do over-egg it. But that's the extreme of someone who's completely out of control and is one of them, from what I can see, from what I've looked into in his background. He's been plugged in there to do this, play that role. That's the whole point. But also, if you come from this perfect unit family, which no one ever does anyway, what were the parents doing when that kid goes, I've just seen Andrew Tate on the telly and he's talking about this? You go, well, he's an idiot. Don't listen to him. Look at how he's behaved. You know, there's no parenting involved in that. So they cut out the parenting completely from that the whole show. There was no parenting, from what you've just told me there, of the parents actually stepping in and going, are you, like, what are you watching? Or that. It's not the fact that they was watching it. It's the fact that kids don't just watch stuff and just go out and murder people at school. They don't. That's not how it happens. And we had the same thing with the Jamie Bolger thing. Do you remember years ago? And they were watching Chucky, and they blamed the Chucky horror films and stuff like that. There's a whole lead up to these things. This doesn't just happen just because they watch a bit of Andrew Tate. And as much as I disagree with the guy, that's ludicrous and silly. So we're going to extremes again there. And that's, again, cybernetics stirring the pot. And what's the outcome? Who does it benefit? It benefits the cult, who want this online harms bill to track everything you're doing. And as, again, it's arbitrary. What they say is harm anyway. So they can flip that and change that an instant. So you're living in chaos. You don't really know. I mean, who's it harming? Who's it harming? Because yes, the end process can be harmful, but there's a lot of things in the way in life that have got you to that harmful situation along the way. So you can't just take A and jump straight to Z. There's a lot of letters in between there that could have stopped it. And that's not how it works. That really isn't how it works. Everything would be harmful if you took it to an extreme. Any comment, any opinion could be taken to an extreme.
Well, this is the point, though, isn't it? I think what they're basically saying is you as parents can't possibly know what your kids are doing at all times. They're locked away in their rooms doing homework, or so you think, but they're not. They're online. They're on YouTube. And so therefore, don't worry about it, parents. We'll take it out of your hands and we'll ban all of this stuff. We'll have control over everything in terms of what can be said and what can't be said and what can be viewed and what can't be viewed. We got you covered, sunshine. It's a bit like that. Put your trust in the state to raise your kids, which is, of course...
Yeah, but it's 1984.
Yeah,
Brave New World.
Yeah. Brave New World. Talking of a brave new world, Richard, Trump and Zelensky have been on the phone together. That's nice.
Oh, it's just the real important bit about this, and not many people are speaking about it, is that you can see this allegiance completely switch over. You had the US, UK there with Ukraine when it suited the cult's agenda to push through this certain situation. Now the US have backed away from the West, taken themselves out and put themselves with Russia. These are two countries that supposedly had nuclear weapons aimed at each other for decades. I mean, come on. So suddenly they're best mates. The thing that connects them again is this messianic agenda, which we can go into. So this is a readout of President Donald Trump's call with President Vladimir Putin, and this is from the US Embassy in Romania. So today, President Trump and President Putin spoke about the need for peace and a ceasefire in the Ukraine war. Both leaders agreed this conflict needs to end with a lasting peace. I mean, that's a nondescript thing. They also stressed the need for improved bilateral relationships between the United States and Russia. So you can see this lining up here. And that's going to isolate the European countries with Ukraine. So you've got these two powerhouses here, and people in the UK are not seeing this coming, that they've basically gone over to that side and jumped in bed with their supposedly devil. But they're all attached through this messianic sect. And it goes down here to say, and this is clearly shows you what this is all about. The leaders spoke broadly about the Middle East as a region of potential cooperation to prevent future conflicts. Why are the Middle East suddenly in there? They further discussed the need to stop proliferation of strategic weapons and will engage with each other to ensure the broadest and possible application. This is the US and Russia. The two leaders shared the view that Iran should never be in a position to destroy Israel. You've gone from Ukraine, Russia to Russia and the US blocking Iran here. It's all about the Middle East. As we said, You dragging that in. You can see that allegiance there, and they're going to try and kick it off with Iran there. And that Ukraine have served its purpose now. It's destroyed. It's done. Zelensky served his purpose. Putin and Trump are very high up in the Chabad Lubavitch messianic sect that I talk about all the time, and so is Netanyahu. This is a messianic push forward to the Middle East, Solomon's Temple, and all of this prophecy stuff that you guys really need to understand to see where these pieces are moving around. But now you've got the US and Russia, and US is going to be taken down as well. It's the Western world. It's Rome. They want to take down Rome. This cult believe that they want to get their revenge on Rome. So Donald Trump, who dressed as the scapegoat, and his son put up the image of that a few weeks back, is dragging the Christian right, the evangelicals, and US into its own demise for the use of ultimately Israel. And they're just telling you here, and this isn't official statements.
The point is, we've spoken about this for a long, long time. They've made no secret of it, really, that a one world government, a one world army, a one world currency, which of course will be digital and moving far, far closer to that, and a surveillance state and all this kind of stuff. We have these conversations. Well, you're not going to get a one world government if you've got superpowers. You're not going to have that because, well, why? Why would I? We're the United States. We're Russia. We're China. Why on earth would we essentially dissolve ourselves into a one world government? No thanks, mate. Whereas if you destroy those nations so that people are basically just left with essentially nothing but rubble, and then it's a case of, right, we need to build back better and do it all again with a whole new system because the old one didn't work. Elected officials don't work. Okay, so we'll just use AI and technocratic experts to do that. Okay, well, the banking system didn't work. Look how much there's been so many crashes and all this sort of stuff. Right, okay, well, let's have a one world currency. And we can't be doing war because it's war that got us into this mess in the first place. So let's have a one world army. And then that way, there can't be a war because who are they fighting against? And people go, oh, that's a very good point. Well, actually, who they're fighting against is anyone that says no to the one world government, which is the point
you.
In the end. Yeah, you watching this, that's who they're fighting against. I look at that whole, because Zelensky and Trump then had a call afterwards, didn't they? I think for an hour. It's just political theatre, isn't it, for me? All these conversations. I was listening to the radio as well. They were saying that, Trump and Putin have had this conversation about a lasting peace in Ukraine, which, means basically Ukraine, which is another story we'll come to later on, in terms of basically just being broken up and handed out like a packet of biscuits. And then it went on to say how Trump and Putin had agreed to have an ice hockey tournament. I mean, I love ice hockey, don't get me wrong. But people are dying. Should we talk about the hockey in a bit? I'll call you tomorrow. We'll talk about the hockey. This is mad, isn't it? It's mad to me. And I was thinking, we're supposed to be in this ceasefire. Well, Ukraine attacked Russia with drones yesterday, and Russia attacked Ukraine with drones the day before. So this is like an Israeli ceasefire, which means it's not a ceasefire. You just carry on doing it. It is insane. It is insane, Rich.
It is totally insane. And just as you say, to add to that, whilst everyone's looking away from that, they're all being, especially in the UK, in Europe, been pointed to the Muslims are bad, Islam's bad. They're all over here flooding us with, and there's certain things that I don't agree with that, of course, in terms of the economy, in terms of how we can cope. Absolutely. So they take truths and expand on them, but they're using it for you to go, look over there. It's Saudi Arabia, the Islam, that's bad. Just look over there whilst we continue to push out the Greater Israel Project, and look at the people that are pushing that agenda, that are pushing the Muslims coming over here and doing all this, and scary Muslims. Look at the people and who they fund. Who they support. They're all pro-Israel, and not the Israeli people, the Zionist, Sabbatean, Messianic sect that's deep within, and have a real prophecy, which is a loose term, purpose for what's going on there in the Middle East. So while you're looking over here and getting angry about Muslims coming over and changing the way we live, and there's certain parts of that I would agree with, you're not looking over there to see what's happening, because the ceasefire isn't a ceasefire. They're just carrying it on. So don't get distracted by the fact that they're telling you to get angry about these other things that have a small legitimate concern, but in the bigger picture, they just play a tiny role.
Yeah, and this is the thing. It's an interesting thing because over the years, you know, the US and the UK and the allies, the real axis of evil, if I'm honest, they go into the Middle East, they destroy nations like Syria, either covertly or on the ground, feet on the ground, like Syria, like Libya, like Iraq, like Afghanistan, which creates this mass, and they all do that on behalf of Israel, by the way, because every single nation that's been targeted has been targeted after Benjamin Netanyahu has gone to America, to Congress, and got his 5,000 applause, and they've all bum lick like they do, and demanded that the US strike those nations. They always strike the nations that he suggests, which is why they're going for Iran now, obviously. But that creates a massive push of mass immigration into Europe, which doesn't work at all. And yes, you know, for every legitimate refugee that comes over and is a nice person and just wants to get away from hell, you've got lots of extremists and other maniacs as well that want to push their way of life on everyone else, which I completely disagree with, of course. So what that then does is that creates anger within the native populations across Europe, completely justifiably and understandably. But then, because they're angry at Muslims and they hate Muslims, they then support Israel, whilst it has a go at Iran, and whilst it commits a genocide in Gaza, and while it bombs Syria, and while it bombs Lebanon, and while it bombs Yemen, they support Israel. When actually, if you look at the full picture, that's where it started. It's where it started. They've used wars to create mass immigration to get you angry, so you'll support more wars.
So what you've just described there, Gaz, is exactly what I described 5 minutes ago, cybernetics, the study of whole systems. They understand how to press A and get to Z. And that's all they do, is they put things in the cybernetic system and they understand, like an algorithm, how to push your buttons. And that's exactly what this is. So once you understand the outcome, you need to understand the end game, which is this messianic technocratic agenda for a world to come, Olam Haba, New World Order, whatever you want to call it, Golden Age of Saturn, whatever. It's all the same thing. What you've just described there, even physically doing it out in the air, is a cybernetic system. Understand that they understand how to push these systems and create new ones and react within. That's what all of this is about. And if you know the end agenda, you can see where every little thing they do fits into that cybernetic system that they twist and turn, and you just don't go for it. You go, does that end up there? Yeah, it does. Oh, we're not doing that then.
That's it.
That's all we need to understand.
That's it. People just need to break the circuit by stepping out of it. They need your consent to do it. They need you to be angry. They need you to hate your neighbour. It was the same 50, 60 years ago, where you were supposed to hate your black neighbour or you were supposed to hate your Irish neighbour. Either way, you're supposed to hate your neighbour. And as long as we all hate our neighbours, then the demons can run amok, and that's the point. Now, moving on, Rich, but not really moving on. US taking over energy infrastructure in Ukraine. As we spoke about earlier, there's going to be nothing left, mate.
Ukraine's electrical supply and nuclear power plants. He said that the United States could be very helpful in running those plants with its electricity and utility expertise. American ownership of those plants would be the best protection for that infrastructure and support for Ukrainian energy infrastructure.
There's literally going to be nothing left of Ukraine. Zelensky, the little action man figurine, has basically sold out his nation to the highest bidder whilst maintaining the role as an absolute hero and leader of the free world. I mean, it's impressive. I'll be honest. But as I said a long time ago, same as Matt Hancock, once you cease being useful, you're a useful idiot that ceased being useful. You're just an idiot. And they will toss you to the wolves. And that's what they'll do with Zelensky, of course. So already the US has got a deal for rare minerals. There you go. Bear in mind, this country's been bombed. So you're already in a position where you're going to need to rebuild. You're going to need investment to rebuild your nation. Even if the war ended now, today, it finished. Okay, well, where do we go from here? So you've sold out the rare minerals. BlackRock are basically in there with all the freaking contracts to rebuild the nation and take all the profits out of that. So you've got Ukraine, which was once the breadbasket of Europe, as we were told. It was the place that supplied all the grain and everything else, which is now basically just meh. And it's always been exploited because you've got the breadbasket of Europe, which was the poorest country in Europe. Now, those two things shouldn't go together, should they? If you're providing so much to a continent, you shouldn't be the poorest. In fact, it should be the complete opposite of that. You should be the one that's, oh yeah, no, God, they're laughing. They're supplying everything. They're laughing all the way to the bank. But obviously, like with Africa, for decades and decades and decades, they've been completely destroyed and exploited, going all the way back into the Bolsheviks, where they were killing bloody millions of Ukrainians, starving them to death, by the way. Now, so the energy infrastructure they're talking about now being taken over by the US, and I don't mean taken over in the sense of like it's going to have, Americans around it to protect it. They're talking about signing it over. And obviously that area of Eastern Europe is huge for natural resources. So US is having the rare minerals, US is having the energy infrastructure and all the profits that come out of that. BlackRock's rebuilding it. Is there anything left for Ukrainians? I imagine, a 0 hours contract, maybe working as a scaffolder is about all they've got to go for. But the other part of it, I think, Rich, is it's the same with Starmer saying about putting troops on the ground, boots on the ground, UK boots on the ground in a peacekeeping capacity. Now, as soon as you've got British troops on the ground, you are in false flag season, because as soon as they get attacked by anyone, but it'll be blamed on the Russians, you bang, powder kegs off. All of a sudden, we're in war. Now, if you could imagine that the energy infrastructure is taken over by Americans, it's being run by Americans, so you can have American troops protecting it, you can have American scientists there, US citizens. Suddenly, when the bombs start coming in, it was the Russians. Well, what's going to happen there? And like you mentioned, the fact that you've got this switch with Trump now aligning with Russia. Now, that can go back the other way in a heartbeat, with a single bomb, with a single, Tomahawk missile attack on a power plant in Ukraine full of Americans. Suddenly that goes, because public opinion in America goes from, we need to talk to the Russians, we need to stop this war, to they killed Americans. And so, with as Russia did, to be fair, in the Second World War, they were aligned with Hitler, then suddenly they switched. And in the end, it was the Russians that, to be fair, if we're brutally honest, as much as the Americans like to pretend they did, it was the Russians that actually sacrificed more soldiers in the Second World War than anyone else, and were so key to destroying the Nazis, particularly by luring the Nazis in to Russia and essentially freezing countless German soldiers to death in the frozen tundra. So I look at that and I think, yeah, okay, it's about destroying Ukraine, taking over Ukraine, but there's also a false flag potential once there's Americans and Brits and other Europeans in there.
Yeah, I think there's one outcome, and again, it's like a chess game. You can see these things coming together. One of the things I'd like to point out, what you talked about there, the minerals there, really important. Those minerals are for AI technology, computer chips. That's exactly what they're there 100%. For, and that's exactly why BlackRock are going in with XAI. And the whole point is they wanted those minerals for the computer chips, for this infrastructure, for this Stargate nonsense, which we'll come to. So that is the whole point, to free that up. They wanted that. It's the breadbasket. They weren't really talking about so much the grain. They were talking about their portion of these minerals for this technology. So there's that element. The other element that you're talking about there, false flag, there is no need for a false flag if they can get Iran to attack the US and do it. They can go back that way. So they've got both avenues covered. They can switch between Russia, US allegiance, or they can switch back. It really depends. But what people, and it's really worrying in the UK, is while we're worrying about all these Muslims coming over, and again, as we've said, there is a legitimate worry about that in terms of our culture and the safety, in terms of, as ever, some nasty people coming over, whatever religion they are or faith. UK and Europe is getting isolated. We don't have any army. We don't have the US military. And when you talk about US, another thing to point out, you're not talking about the US. The US is the army for Israel. That's the point. They don't care about, the US is designed to fall as much as Europe is, but they're using their military. So they're going to use their military to do whatever they need to do, whilst, as exactly did with Ukraine, useful people at that point. It's going to be stoking an attack on Iran from Russia and the US, and that's going to kick off all of this stuff. And where's the UK going to come in this? In Europe, we've been completely isolated from, as you can see now, Russia and the US. Well, now we're back in the Ukraine that has basically just been torn apart. And this is all by design. That's why you need to understand the prophecy part of this. The West is designed to fall. It's called the Edomites. The West is Rome. This is what this cult sees it as, by the way. It's not what I see it as. It's not what you would see it as. This cult sees the West as the Edomites, as Rome. They see us as once chucking these Israelites, if you believe any of them ever existed, out of the Middle East, and they're returning home, and they want to get their revenge, and they want to take down the Roman Empire. We are the sun. We are the pagans. We are the sun worshipping pagans. They are the moon worshipping cults. So they use everything. So without understanding this end game, people just don't understand where the chess moves a bit. They don't understand the rules of the game because they don't understand the outcome. If I told you me and you were going to play a game, but I hid the outcome of what the point was in the game, you wouldn't be able to win. You'd just be groping around, hoping for the best, and that's what the world is doing at the moment. I believe, anyway. Do your own research, come to your own conclusions. But I see more of attack in stoking Iran into attacking the US, and then you're going to get this whole let's go for World War III, Armageddon, destroying of Medina, and this whole the temple nonsense kicking off, and that's what I'm concerned about, and really concerned about, is that Europe has been isolated on purpose here.
Well, they could always get an EU army.
Well, there you go.
Do you know what I mean? Obviously, Albert Pike's vision of the Third World War, whatever people think of Albert Pike, whether there's any legitimacy in that, his Third World War prophecy was political Zionism against the Islamic world, which, of course, Israel and the US, because the US is a political Zionist country, let's have it right. Against Iran would fit that. Final story, Rich. Big tech's data center boom poses new risk for US grid operators.
Yeah, again, this is one when you kind of understand, or try to understand, at least as much as I do understand it, which is, nowhere near as far as I'd like to be. Big tech data center boom poses new risk to US grid operators. What was fascinating about this, and something to keep an eye on, one to watch, as we say. Boston, March 19th, a data center alley, a 30 square mile stretch outside Washington, D.C., and home to more than 200 data centers, consumed roughly the same electricity as Boston. Boston.
Wow.
So power company officials were alarmed when a big chunk of those centres, 60 of them, suddenly dropped off the grid one day last summer and switched to on-site generators. Now, what that meant was like a trip switch in your house. There was too much energy going in. So these data centres actually had the power to drop off and go on self-generators, which caused the power surge into the city that blacked out the whole city. That had the case, they managed to stop it, but blacking out the whole city. So these power centers are trip switches. So you've given the power over to these AI corporation data centers to switch off whenever they want and take the power out. And that was what was really interesting there, is that the power structure, they've plugged themselves into that cybernetic system again, and actually now they control the flow of energy because they can just step aside and go, and then the power centers have got to go, we've got to hold back, we need to, because the trip switch is gone. Because so they're consuming so much energy that if they decide to just shut down for the day, that basically causes the whole city and county and possibly region to go black. So you're handing your power over again. Can you see how this works? It was something that never occurred to me until I read this. I was like, wow, that's a really, really scary situation that these AI tech companies can just basically decide to switch over to their own generators or turn off completely and take the whole power out in your city. Then you are beholden to these companies.
Well, yeah, you can look at that in two ways, Rich, can't you? Essentially, if you are one of these big AI tech giants, essentially you can hold a government, whether it be the local government or the federal government, to ransom, because whatever you want, you're going to get, because if not, this is going offline, in which case you're in big trouble. And the other aspect of that is what is the, I'm not even sure this is a word, what is the hackability of those data centers? So you could have an outside force that could cyber attack that data center, pull that data center offline, therefore then causing Boston and maybe even the whole of Massachusetts to go black. I wonder if that's a possibility as well, because that's a hell of a card to be able to play in a negotiation or in a war. whether it's a Cold War or a hot war, you could, it's quite an ace, isn't it, to be able to bring down a nation's energy like that?
It's huge, and it's really snuck in there. So basically, the stability of that energy grid is going to be reliant on these AI tech companies to keep the stability going. They're not providing the energy, not yet, until they get us all on rat wheels with chips in our heads. But they are there, and they are controlling the stability of that system, that cybernetic system. Again, it's like putting a nasty little person in the Ring of Roses circle, and they just pull everybody down. That's what it is. And they go, I'm the biggest here, so I'm going to pull you all down, and you've got to rely on me to keep going round and round and round. That's exactly, it's not a bad analogy for 7 o'clock in the morning. It's
pretty good, to be fair. Yeah, and you can link that to the plague and everything.
But just be aware of these things, that you're handing over your power to these AI tech companies, because, as I said in a recent article, they're looking for a CEO of the world. Look at it that way, a corporation of the world. That's what it's going to be. It's going to be a worldwide corporation. This Curtis Yarvin lunatic, who's an influence on J.D. Vance, and he's an influence on Peter Thiel, an influence on Donald Trump, who was invited to his gala. He talks about this openly in his Patchwork Society that you can download on the internet and just read, and it's lunatic. But he talks about a corporate class, it's sort of like a corporate monarchy, but essentially it's a global CEO and a global corporation.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what they want, Rich. Essentially, they don't want elected politicians, do they? They want, AI technocratic so-called experts, people that are leaders in their field. So we're told, your Bill Gates of this world, your Hararis of this world, your Klaus Schwabs of this world, that have never seen a ballot box in their life, yet seem to have some kind of inordinate amount of power to control our daily lives. It's very, very strange. And like you say, we should just get on the either metaphorical or literal rat wheel, because who knows, nothing would surprise me, mate, if eventually that's the way we go. Unless we stand up, Richard, which is what it's all about. Yep. We say no, the most important word in the English language. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. Rich, it's lovely to talk to you again. I do enjoy our conversations across the United Kingdom. You're back tomorrow with my brother Jay, I believe. Yep, fantastic. Okay, well, thank you to everyone at home, of course, like I say, for watching. We really do appreciate your support. Head over to shop.iconic.com, use the code trending, you get 10% off the whole range of Iconic coffee, and any profits made go back into this, into what we're trying to do here, so we can have signs like that.
Look at that one.
Posh, innit? We'll see you tomorrow. Take care, Rich. Bye, mate.